We don't pump our gas, we pump our fists. You remember that? You remember that from Jersey Shore? You remember that? We're not in New Jersey. I don't know why I was doing that other than I was pumping my fist. But we are getting ready to break out another episode of AMX Weekly. I'll say it on the show here in a minute, but the pre-show, can you believe that this is the 90th week? 90th. I almost said N0. 9-0. The 90th week, 9-0 of recording these AMX Weeklies. So here's, I'm going to wait for the show. Anywho, I want to throw this out there. Make sure you consume AMX, the Spaniard Show, as much, as often as possible. Why? Because of how valuable and rich it is. 2, because it'll help the show grow. It'll help build the awareness of my message, the power of lifelong learning. And without you, frankly, I cannot do it. I can sit here and talk all day, and I can learn some awesome things and teach some awesome things. But the bottom line is, if nobody's listening, then the message doesn't really get out. And Dred and I are working behind the scenes, but any little bit you can do. And once the show starts, I'll dive into those little bits. But know that it is sincerely appreciated from old Spanny. Old Spanny. All right, let's do this. 1. Spaniard Show on iTunes. Let's rock and roll. 1, 2, 3. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. What movie is that from? I think that's from the Truman Show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I don't know why I said that. I haven't thought about that movie in a long time, but it's what came to the forefront of the podcast when I hit record. Let's dive into this week's AMX Weekly. A couple reminders that I want to throw out there. To all these audio that you're listening to is streamed via facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard, and then the video is uploaded to youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard. So if you have a variety of ways to consume the show. If you want some video, check out youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard. If you simply want the audio, you got the Spaniard Show on iTunes or whatever podcast app you use. And if you want to follow along on the live streams, which are interactive, facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard. I was telling the Facebook live stream earlier, I appreciate every ounce of support that we get, that you give us, your time. Some of you via Patreon, patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. We're up to 8 patrons so far. If you'd like to help contribute to the show, it costs for as little as $1 a month. You can help promote lifelong learning. Essentially, you're helping support the show so that I can learn more, do more, teach more, bring more awesome things to the show, and create more avenues to do those things. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. Link is everywhere the show is. And anything you're doing to help promote this, from the bottom of my heart, is appreciated. This is grassroots. We are, not a big show. We're a small show. We're operating out of a basement office. It's not big time by any means. So any ounce of support that you show me, any minute of your time that you give me, from the bottom of my heart to you, thank you very much, with 100% sincerity. Let's dive into this week's AMX Weekly. Now, I've been talking about this book, The Boys in the Boat, for quite some time. This book is one of my favorite books I've ever read. Dred says it's his favorite nonfiction book he's ever read. It's about the 1936 8-man rowing team that won the gold medal in the Olympics in Berlin. It's fact. It's history. We knew it happened. I knew it happened. I'm reading this book, and I actually finished it already. We still got a while to talk about it on AMX Books. I finished it. I knew what happened, but I'm still sweating, getting chills, nervous, anxious, crying, laughing, smiling, digging deep in my own soul. It's such a tremendous read, and it's a historical document. It's teaching me things I hadn't either known or thought about in regard to World War II and the rise of Nazi Germany and Hitler. This book is fascinating. It's a book that every one of you should read. All of these books are on my website, charliespaniard.com/reading list. So if you've been following along on AMX Books, you've heard me talk about this man named George Pocock. So George Pocock wasn't one of the coaches of the University of Washington rowing team. He was kind of like maybe their Mr. Miyagi or their sage or their mentor. He was actually, by trade, he was a boat builder, and they refer to it as a shell. He was a shell builder at the University of Washington. as well as the rest of the boats in the countries. But he resided, his office was at the University of Washington. And so he operated as sort of this mentor, guide, sixth sense, sage type figure in this whole story. And what I want to talk about today in AMX Books, which I was talking about last week, I talked a lot about him, but to give you the gist of him, okay? So, because it's his gist as a human that touches me in my heart and soul and makes me want to do better, makes me want to do those things that I might not feel like doing. It says this about him. He was inclined to do whatever he attempted on the highest possible level, to build the most delicate and best performing shells possible. He had, quote, a deep commitment to grace, precision, and what would turn out to be a lifelong pursuit of the ideal. That phrase right there, a lifelong pursuit of the ideal. Should we all not be so fortunate and blessed to feel that in our souls, to have a lifelong pursuit of the ideal? Think of that. You know, when you're a kid, maybe a little bit beyond being a kid, when you start to realize a little bit about the world, you start to realize what's out there, potentials, relationships, situations, homes, car, whatever is your ideal. This man, George Pocock, represents this lifelong pursuit of the ideal. The reason that I read books and the reason that I've decided to dedicate my life to the promotion of lifelong learning is for that fact right there, that idea, that lifelong pursuit of the ideal. So I can pursue that ideal pursuit, so you can pursue that ideal pursuit, and at the heart of this show, so that my children, Gracie and Rocky, can pursue that ideal, that lifelong pursuit of the ideal. Whatever it is, start doing some thinking. It's not always easy to think, you know? It's not always easy to reflect on where you're at versus where you want to be. But if ever you're able, or if ever it's possible for you to find this lifelong pursuit of the ideal, you've got to get to know yourself in order to find that lifelong pursuit. I sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, wish you that pursuit, because I can tell you, by it being lifelong learning for me, it is really stinking cool. Moving on to the next bullet point. So our main character, a real man who lived, Joe Rance, is talking about when his wife of many, many years, with whom he passed away later on in life, was talking about her and the first time that she met him. And the reason that I want to bring this segment of the book to light here is because, again, it's building off the idea of a lifelong pursuit of the ideal. You know, have you ever looked at someone? Have you ever been around someone and you just feel something in your soul? They just make you want to be better or do better, or maybe be more bold, maybe be more courageous. They can affect you in a variety of ways. I certainly have one. The Rock. I talk about him all the time. The Rock. How about Rocky Balboa? Those two, Rocky Balboa first and foremost. Sorry, Rock. But you're the second. Actually, Rock, you're the third Rock, because we got Rocky, my son, Rocky Balboa, and then The Rock. But it's that impression that other people have upon you, certainly have upon me, that just inspires me. And it talks in the book about Joe's wife, Joyce, and how they met when they were kids. And this is how they met, and this is what she thought of him upon meeting him in, I believe it was elementary school. Quote, when Joyce first had laid eyes on Joe Rance, sitting in the back of the school bus strumming a guitar, she had been drawn to him, a window to a wider and sunnier world. He seemed the very embodiment of freedom. She resolved that someday she would find a way to compensate for the way the world had so far treated Joe Rance. He seemed the very embodiment of freedom. If I were running a classroom right now, I'd say hit pause, or I wouldn't say hit pause. I would stop and I would ask that question, who to you seems the very embodiment of freedom? Bear Grylls, right? Bear Grylls seems the embodiment of freedom. And when you identify this person, you know, what does that do to you? You know, when you see that person, when I watch Bear Grylls and his mountainous adventures, or I watch The Rock board his plane and fly across seas and then get up early and then train and then have his cheat meal and then train and make a fabulous movie, etc., that just makes me want to do better. It just feels, it stokes my fire. It just makes me want to get up and do. So if you don't have those people in your life, find those people. Find a thing. Find a way. Anyway, you can connect with that person from a distance. That's the goodness of social media. There's a lot of downfalls, but the goodness is You can in a sense be their virtual friend. I mean, actually, yeah, you can be their virtual friend. That's what they're called. I follow these people so I can get doses of that. And what if we all, so Joyce, that's how Joe made Joyce feel. This embodiment of freedom. She wanted to do better. She realized she had a connection with this other human being. But then she wanted to compensate for the way the world had so far treated Joe Rance. So Joe was mistreated by his parents. The world has not been kind to him. He underwent a lot of adversity as he was a youngster, stuff that no youngster deserves or should ever go through. And she set out her mission to do right by him. And it's like, it's heartwarming the way it talks about later in their life of how she never forgot that idea. But what if we all had that burning desire or mission to help others? How much better would the world be if we all had this burning desire to right the wrongs that are done to other people, or not even look for a wrong that we have to right, just do right unto other people? It'd be a much more pleasant place to be. Let's move on to Tuesday's episodes of AMX Kids. Remember, there's 4 learning tracks on the Spaniard Show. AMX Books is where I read books and talk about them in brief Monday through Friday episodes. AMX Kids is where we read kids' books, talk about their lessons. That comes out on Tuesdays. AMX Talks are interviews and or keynotes that I do, mostly interviews. Comes out on Thursdays. AMX Weekly, what you're listening to right now, comes out on Saturdays. Remember, AMX simply means learning. It's my system of learning. It can be your system of learning too. Tuesday's episode, AMX Kids, comes from Jocko Willink's book, Mikey and the Dragons. I've read Jocko's books. I've talked about them on the show, Dichotomy of Leadership, Extreme Ownership, the Way of the Warrior Kid. I have another Way of the Warrior Kid book that I'm probably going to read. And also Mikey and the Dragons. Mikey and the Dragons is a kid's book. He wrote a kid's book, series of kids' books. They're tremendous books. If you are a parent or a teacher or a coach or have young people in your lives that you'd like to influence and in effect, get them these books. Way of the Warrior Kids series, there's 2 books, and Mikey and the Dragons. I'm here to talk about Mikey and the Dragons today. I ordered it a long time ago, pre-order. It came, I read it. I'll tell you what, I read it to my son and my daughter. My son is 2, so he's a little bit fickle. My daughter generally loses interest in books. I'll have to remind her, Gracie, come on, let's stay focused, or she'll go away, then come back. This book, when she saw I was getting to the end of the book, I heard her say, "Aw," and I needed to specify. And I said, "Wait, Grace, why did you say aw?" And she said, "Because it's almost over." If that's not a testimonial, if that's not a testimonial of getting this book and reading it, I don't know what else is. There was also an instance, and this book is about fear, overcoming fear. The fear that we have in our head, most of the time being bigger, badder, scarier than fear in reality. It's not reality, right? It's in your head. And the idea is getting it out of your head and facing it head on. And then at one point she said, "This isn't scripted either. I don't get any money for saying this stuff. It's just a freaking good book." She said, "Wow, Dad, I'm afraid of all the things Mikey's afraid of." And it was like, this is glorious. This is it. This is everything I want in a book experience with my child. And there's a section in the book that's a letter from a father, a deceased father to his son. And I couldn't get it out. I was crying. And my wife was in the kitchen. My wife's in the kitchen making fun of me and saying, "Yeah, Charlie, what are you supposed to be saying here? Can you read, please?" It was oh my goodness. It'll tug at your heartstrings as well. It's tremendous. AMX Kids come out every Tuesday. Jocko's book, Mikey and the Dragons, get it. All the books I reference are on my website, so if you ever want to keep track of them or remember them, charliespinner.com/reading list. Moving back to The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown, I'm going to talk a little bit about Joe Rance, and I'm going to talk about competition, because this book, in this book, there are rowers who go on to win the Olympic gold medal, 1936 Berlin Olympics. And there's a lot of insight into the psychology of coaching and competing in this book, and I loved it because that's where I thrive, right? I thrive in that balance of nervousness and anxiety and execution and preparation. That's what I live for. Being on the edge, being on the precipice, and either making it or breaking, right? Making or breaking. In the book, Joe Rance learns this, right? And this has to do with defeating an adversary or equal. And I really resonated with this, and I brought it to the show a second time because I spoke about it in AMX book 628. But I brought it to the show because that's why I love fighting so much. Professional fighting, that is. Because you have two total alpha dogs who just have no doubt. And if they do have doubt, they put it over in the corner with baby. And they're operating without that doubt where I will beat you. I will defeat you. And then there's nowhere to go. You shut a cage door. There's no talk. It's fight, period. One winner, one loser. That's why I love wrestling as well. So Joe Rance learns this about defeating an adversary. Quote, "It wasn't necessarily enough just to give your all from start to finish. You had to master your opponent mentally. You had to know something he did not. That down in your core you still had something in reserve. Something you had not yet shown. Like so much in life, crew was partly about confidence, partly about knowing your own heart." Sometimes it wasn't necessarily enough just to give it your all. Why? Because every one of us at that level is giving it our all. You need to have something else. You need to have an insane belief in yourself. And I'll caveat that with something here in a second. You need to have an insane belief in yourself that you have something more, something deep in your soul, right? The fire that burns within us, right? That's what you need to have. And how do you get that? You get that only, from my experience, you get that only through preparation. By believing 100%, 1,000,000%, I prepared harder than you. I trained harder than you. And for that, I will not crack. Because at the end of the day, at that level of competition, it's about getting the other person to crack. It's about getting that other person to show their mortal card, right? It's about holding up holding your deck, right? Holding your deck such that they can't see you're immortal. And that only comes from my experience, from insane preparation. You'll gain that confidence. It talks about knowing your heart. Crew was partly about confidence, partly about knowing your heart. You develop that confidence by way of knowing your heart, and you only get to know your heart by way of insane preparation. When you can look across the ring, across the stage, up at the teacher, whatever it is, and know that I've gone above and beyond. Every ounce of my being has been put into this mission or this purpose, that I can now operate free of fear. Rather, like Mikey, put that fear over there in the corner because it's a human component, and operate as if there were no fear. Even if there's fear, we prepare such that we put it in the corner. There's no doubt about it. If you can't do it, if you can't do that, then you have not prepared well enough. It would take some thinking out loud and some conversation for someone to prove me wrong. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I feel very, very, very confident about that. Moving on, this is another great point, something really simple and profound that you can take with you today, moving forward. So Joyce could never understand, Joe's wife Joyce, she could never understand why he didn't get angry at his parents. Remember, Joe's parents, if you've been following along with AMX books and or you read the book, Joe's parents mistreated him terribly. His stepmother gave his father an ultimatum, I believe 2 different times. At least once, I think twice, where it's either him or me, Harry. It's either him or me. Either he goes or I go. So what kind of stepmother does that? What kind of parent does that? What kind of father would allow that to happen? But it was done to Joe, like I said, at least once, I think twice. And so she could never understand why he wasn't filled with rage towards his family. And he says this, quote, "It takes energy to get angry. It eats you up inside. I can't waste my energy like that and expect to get ahead. I have to stay focused. Got to take care of myself." Now, I'm speaking off the cuff here, and I don't know the details. I just see present day Kevin Hart getting a lot of hate online. I don't know. I don't fully know what's going on. But I do know that I like Kevin Hart. I do know that I read his book. I do know that I respect him. I do know that he makes mistakes. I know that every one of us makes mistakes. But I think it's interesting how if you read his responses, he's not buying into the negativity. Look, I don't, like I said, whatever. I don't want to argue about what's what here. I'm just simply stating his habit of staying away from the negative. Joe Rogan has said over and over again that he systematically gets rid of the negativity from his life. And that's what Joe is telling us right here. He's saying, I can't. It takes energy to get angry, and I don't have the energy to waste because I have to put it all towards this mission and this purpose, and this being the best rower I can possibly be so we can win a gold medal. Utilize your energy efficiently. That's the bottom line, is utilize your energy efficiently. If you're wasting energy by hating someone, by getting upset at someone, and you could put that energy somewhere else and move the needle forward, that's what you got to do. If it moves the needle forward, use it, devote energy to it. If it doesn't, boom, get rid of it. Moving on to the next bullet point. This is from AMX Talks 208. This came out on Thursday. And this is where I sat down with Amanda and Sarah from Team Red, White, and Blue. I can't help but smile when I reflect on these interviews and conversations I have because they're tremendous. They're so spirit-building, life-enhancing. They're like performance-enhancing interviews or conversations, right? PECs. Because I just get so much from them. And this is from Amanda and Sarah, who work with Team Red, White, and Blue. Team Red, White, and Blue is a veteran service organization, a VSO, which is an acronym I hadn't known before, a VSO, Veteran Service Organization. And they have Team Red, White, and Blue. And Team Red, White, and Blue is about building connection, right? Building connection, especially with military folks as they transition out of military life into civilian life. And it also incorporates physical activity. I love physical activity. I love training people because it's almost like it creates a blank slate, or it gets rid of preconceptions and agendas and angers and frustrations and whatevers, where it becomes human to human conversation without blinders. And they incorporate physical activity into their events too, which I really like. But Amanda said this, quote, "It's important to understand that we don't necessarily have to experience the same things to experience similar emotions. We can connect based on some of the emotions rather than the same exact experience. That's an important message for civilians who might be reluctant to get involved with a veterans service organization or veterans who might be isolating themselves, thinking no one can understand me. The reality is that we don't have to have the same experiences to understand each other." I think that's a great story there, segment on empathy in general. I think the vast majority of civilians will say, what should I say to a military person when I see them in the airport? Thank you for your service. Some military folks will say, yeah, that's fine with me. Other ones will say, they don't like that. I've heard both sides of the coin. But I think an important mindset here that Amanda's telling us is that we shouldn't feel weird. We shouldn't feel awkward. Because even though we've never been in combat, even though we don't know the military lifestyle, if we're not in the military lifestyle, we still have shared emotions. They're about different things, but we're both humans. We both feel things. We both suffer loss. We both suffer traumatic experiences. We both suffer lack of confidence and fear, etc. So I think this was a really neat message to me. And I've said this before about interacting. I had Matt Marcinek, who has cerebral palsy. I had him on the show, and I said to him, I don't know what to say. What should I say? And he said, just, I'm a human, man. Talk to me like I'm a human. Talk to everyone else like they're human. So that was a takeaway that I got from that interview and sit down with Amanda and Sarah. Lastly, back to our old friend George Pocock. And you'll find such inspiration from this guy. But on following his gut, so he came from a long line of boat builders. That was his legacy, his father's grandfather's legacy over in England. They built boats, right? And he was devoted to the mastery of these boats. So he revolutionized the sport. He changed the way they rowed, the technique of rowing, but he also revolutionized the boats, the shells. So on following his gut, right? So he was recommended by a former coach, Ed Leader from University of Washington, where he should switch the type of wood from which he builds the boats. From Spanish cedar, which was a little bit brittle, it cracked often, to red cedar. Red cedar was more resilience. It had more give to it. It was found in the Pacific Northwest. It was cheaper. Didn't have to import it. A lot of varieties going on. A lot of factors going on there. He finally decided, even though it was against the norm and it was innovative, to switch. And he said this about it, quote, "This unflagging resilience, this ability to bounce back, to keep coming, to persist in the face of resistance, was the magic in cedar, the unseen force that imparted life to the shell." So he's talking, this book is about this holistic experience, this thing that the boys, the men couldn't put their finger on, couldn't quite properly come up with the words to express what was going on here. This special space and time, this special circumstances that came together with a special group of guys who stayed together from the time they won the Olympic gold until they all passed away. I have chills right now explaining it. But this idea that the ability to bounce back, to keep coming, to persist in the face of resistance was the magic in cedar, the unseen force that imparted life to the shell. How about if we said the ability to bounce back, to keep coming, to persist in the face of resistance? That's the magic in living, right? That's the unseen force. And we can't all have that. You got to put the work in for it, but it's there for the taking. This has been AMX Weekly number 90. I appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, every ounce of support that you want to show or you'd like to show the show is appreciated. We got those 4 tracks, AMX Books, AMX Kids, AMX Talks, AMX Weekly throughout the week. Uploading all of these audio and video to YouTube, youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard, facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard for the live streams. And if you'd like to help patronize in a good way, I think that's the verb. If you'd like to help support the show financially for as little as $1 a month, you can go to patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. We're up to, I believe, 8 contributors right now, right over $41. So thank you to every one of you. Don't wait. Be the next one to help support the show. There's some cool perks you're going to get also included in there. Some of them are going to be hangouts, book talks, interactions. So if you dig this talk and you'd like to take it further, make it enhance the interactive level of it, consider supporting the show at patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. And my speaking gigs are like really coming together for 2019. It's tremendous. It's like my dreams are starting to maybe happen. And if you're looking for a speaker, a school, a sports team, a business organization, and you would like someone to come out there and promote lifelong learning and then provide you resources that will go on forever, as long as I can go on, check out charliespaniard.com/booking. I'll see you on Monday for AMX Books. Have a great weekend. Boy, that feels good. That feels good. So, AMX Weekly 90. Boom. Thank you all for watching. Like I said, if you're watching on Facebook, going to be watching on YouTube, subscribe to the Spaniard Show on iTunes. Reach out to me. I want to talk books. I want to talk learning. I want to help you learn. I want to teach everything I learned. So please stay tuned. I'll see you on Monday.